Hello and welcome to another F1 report. Mercedes' Valtteri Bottas secured his maiden F1 victory on Sunday, holding off the late charge of Ferrari's Sebastian Vettel to win the Russian Grand Prix just 6/10 ahead of his rival. Vettel's teammate Kimi Raikkonen was third, whilst Mercedes' Lewis Hamilton was nowhere near the podium, finishing 36 seconds behind, Bottas in fourth. Returning for today's show, I'm delighted to say, a former F1 driver and Le Mans winner David Brabham, and alongside him for the very first time is former F1 driver and the original Stig, Perry McCarthy. Welcome to you both. You all right?
Hey Mark, how you doing?
Good. It's a bit of a reunion for you guys, isn't it? You were, if I'm not mistaken, teammates back in '97. That was a knowing look.
Yeah.
Back in '97 at Le Mans, is that right?
World champion for the full World Championship GT, wasn't it? And of course Le Mans and our Sebring.
Yeah, where we finished third.
Where we finished third. That was a massive
we're in a
result for
Panos,
us.
you know, front engine Panos. Now, my dad in 1961 told America actually the engine should be in the rear, but Don Panos thought the engine should be in the front in 1997. So
the only time we had the engine in the rear was when we spun it.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. Well, looking back to this weekend's race, I mean, what did you make of it as a whole? I mean, I know there wasn't a huge amount of overtaking, but we had some tension towards the end, didn't we, Perry?
I thought the first lap, the start was, you know, pretty exciting. They were all bunched up going in, and there wasn't an awful lot of room around there. So, as we've seen before, starts are so important. Big one for Valtteri to skip the Ferrari front row, as it were. That dashed a lot of Italian hopes, of course, and big surprise that Lewis really wasn't hanging on to that pack too well.
David, enjoy it?
I did actually. I mean, obviously there wasn't a huge amount of action, but in terms of strategy, trying to see whether or not Seb had enough pace at the end to catch him. Yeah. I was still drawn to the race, even though there wasn't a huge amount of overtaking.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, if any of you guys missed it, here's a little recap of that brilliant Bottas win.
Today, it's all changed as Ferrari take their 6th pole this decade.
I have no state of charge.
Lights out and away we go then. Sebastian Vettel leads them away. And Valtteri Bottas has got into the lead. What a sensational start there from Valtteri Bottas. A Williams of Lance Stroll spinning around.
Okay, so basically Palmer just turned into me. I don't know where I was looking.
Bottas caught them all napping a little bit on the restart.
My right rear brakes on fire. Okay, switch off please, Daniel. Switch off. Sorry about that, mate.
Look how clear he is now of Sebastian Vettel.
Why is my car overheating, guys? The car is on the limit, Lewis. Blisters on the front left.
Vettel's got the gap down to 3.2. Suddenly they are putting him under pressure.
Losing time with these guys.
Bottas is pitting.
Push now, we need everything.
We are heading for something a little dramatic here in Sochi.
Raikkonen is catching him hand over fist. That could be significant. The gap down to 3 seconds now.
For the first time ever, Valtteri Bottas wins the Grand Prix. It's Bottas who takes it in Russia.
Took quite a while, huh?
Well, the victory means that Bottas has now become the 107th different winner in Formula One. It's still quite an elite club, isn't it? But that was great for Formula One, I think, and great for a guy who is universally liked within the paddock, I think.
Yeah, I think it's great. I mean, great for Formula One to have a different winner. For him, obviously, to have his first one, which is huge. We've never experienced that, have we, Paul? But in terms of winning your first Grand Prix must be absolutely amazing. And he's worked so hard. He's, what was it, 80-odd races, I think, leading up to his first victory. And he is liked around the paddock. You can sense that. But he just kind of gets on with it. And it takes time for him to settle into a new team, particularly as it's been centred around Lewis a bit.
That closing stage, though, for him, you know, you could feel it for him, couldn't you? Because you're going to be in that car. You're thinking, you've been given the chance, everybody is expecting, you've got to stop Lewis getting away, otherwise you will be treated like a number two. This is his chance, he had it all to lose, and every single brake, every single bit of feel on the pedals, coming into, there were mistakes lining up everywhere waiting for him to accept, and he made just the one mistake. Flat spotted the tyres, which caused a bit of drama, but inside his head he must have been thinking, do not mess up, this is me, I've got this.
He soaked it up very well, soaked up that pressure really well. And we heard him towards the end coming on the radio in an incredibly calm and polite manner to his engineer saying, you know, don't talk to me, guys, towards the end, I want to focus. He does seem incredibly calm in that situation, doesn't he?
Yeah, I love the radio messages, actually. My favourite one of the weekend was Kimi when he said, how the hell did Bottas get ahead of me? You know? And he said, look, he was leading the race to me.
Yeah. OK, what do you say to people who say that, you know, he's in a Mercedes, he should be winning races? I mean, he's got a tough job, hasn't he? Because not only is it's tough to win any Grand Prix, but his three main rivals are world champions, and the guys in the Ferrari are arguably in a potentially better car, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, you'd have to say he's in a Mercedes, and that is a winning car. So yes, he has got to win, and he knows that. And to like you said, he's got to fight his ground quite early on to say, hey, you know what, I am a title contender, and I think he definitely proved that this weekend.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And what about towards the end when Massa sort of got involved in the fight, didn't he? When he at least appeared to sort of let his former teammate Valtteri Bottas through very easily, and yet Seb got held up ever so slightly. Do you think there was anything in that?
Well, Felipe does maintain that he left the gap for Sebastian to take, and he accused Sebastian of chickening out. But it did make
Where was the gap?
Well,
around the outside, yeah.
Yeah, but it was a gap.
Yeah, well, yes.
Yeah, but it's you know, you just thought he did make it.
He could have done more to get out of the way.
Yes.
I don't think there's any doubt. Anybody can read into it what they want.
Well, we love a good story, don't we?
Well, let's make something up.
Well, he wasn't fighting though, was he? You know.
No, he wasn't blocking or anything.
No, but he wasn't fighting for a position there, so it wouldn't have cost him anything in that race to have got out Sebastian's way.
Always looks easier though from the outside, doesn't it? Well, with his first win under his belt, does that now take the pressure off Valtteri Bottas going forward? Ted Kravis asked our very own Johnny Herbert after the race.
Well, Mark, that's an interesting question, and let's ask a guy about when he won his first race. Did you feel that there was a pressure lifted from your shoulders, a monkey off the back somewhat?
Yeah, definitely so, because it's the dream you've had since you're sort of 10 years old when you were karting, and when it actually happens, it just gives you sort of that one belief. And I think, secondly, when you go into the next couple of races, and I remember especially when I was at Stewart, I went into the next race in Malaysia, I actually found it that much easier to just sort of concentrate on the job I'd done, because I've experienced a race win. And I think this is what we're going to see from Valtteri, a stronger man who's going to be more of a threat for his teammate Lewis Hamilton.
But Valtteri spoke about how it was important to prove it to himself as much as anything else. I found that a bit surprising. You guys have this amazing self-belief, don't you?
Yeah, you have the belief, but until you achieve it, you haven't reached there's always that doubt. So, and that now has gone. That is totally erased from his mind, and that is where that strength is just going to get stronger and stronger. But it's great for us because we've got another guy who's going to get into this mix, this team orders we were talking about beforehand. That's all evaporated now.
OK, last quick one. He's undoubtedly an expert round here, isn't he, Bottas? If there's one circuit you say of the year where he's expert, it's Russia. Yes or no, is he going to win more races this year?
Yes, he will. I think he'll be very, very strong in the next couple of races. Canada, that's another one he's strong at.
That's true. Thanks, Johnny.
OK, well, do you guys agree? Do you think there are more wins in the bag for Valtteri Bottas now?
Well, totally. You know, but what I found really unusual was that everybody was talking up possible team orders for the remainder of the year after only 3 races, and I thought it's pretty silly. You've got to let Valtteri get into this team, let him feel his way. We know he's a fantastic talent, and he's stopped the rot. So now, where's the excuse to say, right, you can't have the same position or the same advantages or the same attention? You know, it's all there for Valtteri. It was a very, very important win for him.
Well, he's now won 1 race. Lewis has won 1 race. So, from Mercedes' point of view, it's not quite such a clear-cut and easy decision, is it, to make for moving forward in terms of team orders?
Yeah, I don't think they need to make that decision. You know, they showed over the last few years it's you guys go for it, and then they've got to try and manage that. I think there will be more wins. I think Valtteri, at the end of his sort of race, doing an interview, he said, now I know what to do to win races. And that's a massive psychological step for any driver who kind of thinks he knows how to win a Grand Prix or any sort of race. And then once you do, there's a completely different way you view life and yourself. Everything starts to come down. You kind of go into a sense of knowing. And as soon as you see that, you start seeing more success.
So can we count him as a genuine title contender, do you think?
Absolutely.
Yeah? You agree?
Yeah, I do. I mean, you know, you get enough points, win enough races, you'll do it. But I think that there's another dynamic inside the team, is that obviously with some, you know, incredibly gifted drivers that are within Formula One, but he is directly against them compared to Lewis Hamilton, which many people, including myself, believe that he's probably best driver on the grid.
Yeah, it's a tough measure, isn't it? Or in fact, speaking of Lewis, where was he? What happened to Lewis this weekend? I mean, he qualified 4th, he finished 4th, but he was, half a minute behind his teammate.
I'm sure he's asking that same question, to be honest with you, because, he's an exceptional talent, and he normally turns up on the day and does the job. He is vulnerable, though. We've seen that in the past, where some weekends just don't seem to click. But he always comes back, and when he does, he comes back stronger. So I think we're in for a very interesting year this year, particularly between the two teammates of Valtteri and Lewis, but also with Ferrari in the mix, and hopefully if Red Bull get their act together and go in there as well.
I mean, why is it, do you think, that every now and again he doesn't show up? It's very rare, isn't it? But every now and again he looks like he's never on the pace, even from FP1 onwards. Is it something to do with the car? Or do you think it's something psychological with Lewis? Do you think he's easily distracted? Is there more going on weekends like this?
There appears to be those moments with him, but if you look at the overall approach Hamilton's got, I mean, he's got so many pole positions, so many wins, 3-time world champion. As a regular achiever, he's pretty much up there. I think that's why we noticed so much, if there is any kind of dip. But these cars,
he's human.
Yeah. But it's everything appears now to be so incredibly complicated. If something is like 1 mil out, half a mil out here, even the domino effect of not getting in the proper warm-up laps in FP3 or whatever, everything seems to stack up to a result.
I'd be interested to see what I'm not inside his head, but if he goes to a race meeting, normally the car's right, he's right, but if there's something not right when he arrives, if the car's quite not in its place, what goes through his thought processes after that? That's the bit I'd be quite interested in. How does he view it? What's his attitude towards it? Does he get down quite quickly? Because I think there is a vulnerability there with Lewis, a sort of insecurity that we've seen over the years, and I think sometimes that just catches him up.
Just occasionally.
Yeah, not very often.
Well, let's move on to Ferrari. What do you think of Ferrari's weekend? Because, I mean, obviously a great result. They dominated in the early part of the weekend, dominated qualifying, and in the race, Valtteri was able to sort of disappear once he got past him at the beginning. What do you think happened there, Terry?
Well, he was to begin with. I mean, he gapped Sebastian pretty well in the opening laps, went up to 3.8 seconds fairly quickly. That was cool. But there was something going on a little bit further back which might disguise a Mercedes problem. One of Lewis's problems was, the temperatures.
Yeah.
And with the blanking on the rads. And, maybe Merc are running absolutely now on the limit, and we're going to see more faults there. I mean, fantastic.
Yeah, because Ferrari are so close now. They're finding every little... They are under pressure, absolutely.
If, I know we've said this about many different races, but if that race had gone maybe 2 or maybe another 3 laps, would we have seen Valtteri come under a lot more pressure from Sebastian? That was closing down.
Well, do you think they got the strategy right? I mean, do you think that Ferrari, leaving Seb out for another 7 laps after Bottas pitted, do you think that was the right call, or should they have brought him in earlier, covered him off, and got onto pretty much the same strategy? Would that have brought him closer towards the end, do you think?
I mean, who knows?
Exactly.
I mean, it's so difficult to say. They would have been running a strategy which they felt at the time was the best strategy. I think it was all won into the first corner on the first lap, because if it was the other way round, it probably been a result of Sebastian winning, or whoever was in the lead. Although I have to say, having a little bit of a straight line advantage that Mercedes have, you could see that on the start. I think yes, I think Valtteri got a perfect start, but the way he went past, there's a power advantage there as well. So
there's also a very big
that's not easy to get past.
I do think that Seb booked a tiny bit on that one. I mean, the Ferrari from pole, what looked to be a pretty good start, but I'm sure I heard the engine come down just a tiny bit, and Valtteri got a great, because I personally don't think that's quite a run down to turn 1. Yeah. But, was that enough of a tow to get that kind of slingshot out?
Well, that's a good question, because, like in the race, when they're behind, they're not towing like they used to, obviously. It's very different this year. So, for me, that's more of a power advantage off the start, going up through the gears. Yeah,
well, it was absolutely critical to the outcome. And I mean, just quickly, what do you think of Kimi's race? Because Kimi has been under pressure this year so far, hasn't he, with his seat at Ferrari? But actually, in the practice sessions and going into qualifying, he was looking arguably even stronger than Seb. What do you think of his weekend?
Which he did last year. I think we're very quick to jump on someone's not having a good weekend. And I think we just need to be careful of that. But I think, you know, Kimi's doing a good job. You know, at the end of the day, for Ferrari, they want one of their drivers winning. They don't probably care who it is. If the other one's picking up the points for the Constructors' Championship, great. But, you know, I think Kimi will have maybe not as good a year as Seb. I think Seb's just sort of stepped up from last year, because last year wasn't a good year for him. Yeah, no, it was difficult. OK, well, there are only 23 points separating the top 3 drivers in the standings, while Mercedes top the Constructors' table by just a single point ahead of Ferrari. I'm going to put you both on the spot very quickly. Who's your money on for the Constructors and the Drivers' title this year? Over to you, pal.
He used to say that when it rained. Any time it rained, it was my turn in the car.
Well, exactly, yeah.
Constructors, who's going to win, Ferrari or Mercedes?
I'd like to throw something into the mix. Obviously, I guess, like to see a fantastic fight. Let's go for Ferrari. You know, Merc have had a fantastic run, so let's hope that the Ferrari... Because if Ferrari are in the mix, that does mean that the fight will continue all year, rather than it peaking out after a few races. And
will you go for Seb to top the drivers?
Yeah, he could do. Because the thing about, as we were just saying about Kimi, but the thing about Valtteri and Lewis, if they're taking points off each other, then, you know, maybe...
I'm going to go for Bottas. I'm going to go for Bottas.
What, for the World Championship?
For the World Championship, yeah.
Wow, there we go. You heard it here first.
Why not? Do something different,
Absolutely.
You
know? All right, great. Thanks, guys. Well, that's all we've got time for in part 1, but join us after the break as we look forward to how the other teams fared in Russia. Bye for now. Welcome back to the F1 Report. Mercedes' Valtteri Bottas stole the show in Sochi with his first ever win in F1, but the race was itself shortened by a lap after Fernando Alonso's McLaren broke down on the formation lap, meaning the Spaniard has yet to finish a race this season. And in Sunday's case, he couldn't even start it. Guys, I mean, this is a question we are asking every week on this show. What is going on with McLaren?
Yeah, it's good, isn't it? You know, it's like
good for who?
Fantastic facilities, brilliant people there, and it's all falling apart. I mean, Zach Brown is coming to run the joint, must be tearing his hair out at the moment. You know, obviously we've both experienced that situation ourselves.
What? Tearing your hair?
Yeah. but you know, what was, when Ron first announced it, a great promising partnership with Honda, has turned into a complete, what appears to be a cultural nightmare. Yeah. And now they're going to extend the misery. I understand that Sauber have, you know, they've decided to go with Honda.
Well, what do you make of that?
I think Honda's problem stems back several years, actually, because there was a cultural change in Honda. When Mr. Kawamoto ran Honda Racing and he ran Honda Global, it was a racing culture, and then the corporates came in, and the whole thing sort of changed, and I don't think they've really caught up again. And
you think?
Well, yeah, it seems like it, doesn't it? But if you, I mean, to come up with a complicated engine like that is a big task. But they've also changed that engine again, which means more development time, and this is what we're seeing. We're seeing this very difficult phase because, and of course, McLaren, you know, points makes prizes and big money. You know what I mean? So the pressure is massively on at the moment, and it's at the end of the day, it's up to Honda to get their act together, and I think that's going to take time.
I'm just wondering how Sauber actually broke it to Ericsson. You know, you said you can't think of any way we can go slower. Well, guess what? For 2018.
Well, let's look at that then. So Sauber taking Honda from 2018 onwards. I mean, the negatives are obvious, aren't they, from the current situation? But if you look at the positives of that, from Honda's point of view, they get another team's worth of data. So they get more laps, hopefully more laps on the board. From Sauber's point of view, at the moment they're using a year-old Ferrari engine, which can't be updated. So can you see why they've gone down this route?
Well, yeah, I can. They're using the year-old Ferrari engine. However, the year-old Ferrari engine next year, for this year's Ferrari engine, wouldn't be such a bad move, to be quite frank. But there's,
if they can get it.
If they can get it. But there's maybe one small thing behind the scenes, and this is just guesswork, but I imagine they pay for their Ferrari engines at the moment. Perhaps they're not paying for the Honda engines, which is probably 25 million of anybody's money
somebody like Sauber
for next year.
It's massive.
So, and maybe Honda might help inject a couple of bob into Sauber as well.
Yeah, no, I think there's it's going to be a really interesting one, because they will be pinning their hopes on a big change at Honda, of course, just like McLaren are.
Sure.
I guess we all are too, aren't we?
Yeah.
Well, what about Fernando then? Obviously a disastrous weekend, but he's got this distraction of Indy coming up. I know, you know, you've got a family tradition of him. Am I right in thinking that your dad, your brother and your nephew have all taken part in the Indy 500?
Yep, they have, yeah.
So what do you think of Fernando going out to do this?
Well, I think as soon as Fernando stopped on the circuit, he was looking for his flight ticket to get over to Indy. But it's such a huge event, and I think it's fantastic for IndyCar as well, because, you know, we could see the audience figures change dramatically by 50% when he had just turned up at a race, not even alone being in a race when he was at Brabham Motorsport. So I think it's a great challenge for him. It's not going to be easy, there's no doubt. He's got a great team, he's got a good crew around him. And everybody will be glued to the Indy 500, less so on the Monaco Grand Prix, I think.
Let's hope it's a good news story for somebody.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, speaking of good news stories, let's look at the other teams from this weekend then. Force India. They are the epitome of consistency right now, aren't they? I think they will admit they haven't got the strongest car, but that's a 16th consecutive points finish for them. That was Perez in 6th and Ocon in 7th. That's got to go down as a good result, isn't it?
I think if ever you look at people, I mean, this has been mentioned about Force India before, they do punch above their weight. You know, they're consistently up there. They surprise us sometimes by being really ultra competitive. They don't seem to have too many surprising off days. But it's a nice team. It's a nice vibe, good environment.
Yeah, no, I agree. And then just quickly looking at one of their former drivers, Nico Hülkenberg left the team to join Renault. Probably had quite high hopes, didn't he, at that point? What did you make of his weekend and his decision to join a manufacturer team in Renault? Is it going as well as he would have expected?
Yeah.
I think you know, he's gone there because he's thinking long term. You know, at the end of the day, yes, Renault only really came back last year. Yeah, so they need time. They need time, and it normally takes 3 to 4 years for something like that to really start to kick in. And so for him, he'll be going through the growing pains. He'll be learning with the team. He'll be giving his input and development for next year's car. And I can only see that improve, to be honest with you.
Okay, but that's one of their drivers. What about the other one, Jolyon Palmer? It's been a bit of a difficult start to this season, has it? And this weekend, it's got to be one to forget for him.
Yeah, I guess Jolyon was trying to get on the same flight as Fernando out of the track. What a complete nightmare he had. But again, this is the big thing, is that, you know, as we all know, your worst enemy is your teammate. Obviously, apart from us, you know. But because you're so directly compared to somebody's time in the same car. So you've got Nico, where it's actually all going well, and Nico's a really great driver, as I think we all believe. And you've got Jolyon, who's a superb driver, but it's not going right for him, and it keeps not going right for him, and all these little things separate him and Nico. So the paddock gossip, of course, is, where's Jolyon going? Nico's kicking him.
As a driver, you both have been there. Is that something that happens when things start going wrong? Can it just spiral out of control and one lead to the other? Is it difficult to get yourself out of that situation?
There are so many things around it where Jolyon's got nothing to do with it. You know, if the gearbox is going, or if the engine's going, or if the suspension's collapsing, or whatever the situation might be on his car, you know, we've seen bad luck happen to other drivers, and it's I wrote a book on it. but seriously, it's all of it available in all good bookshops. It's going really well. We sold another copy just last month. But that's the thing, though. When it does start going bad, you're then starting to look over your shoulder, aren't you? You're then
I think, for me, I think it's a difficult situation for Jolyon, and I think he's got to figure out how to be strong mentally through this, and not focus on things that he really doesn't need to focus on. And I think he can be led down that way a little bit with his own mind. I thought, you know, the incident, I don't think it was his fault. I think Grosjean went down there asking way too much. He turned in and he got knocked out. And if you listen to what he said afterwards, you know, Jolyon said in his interview, I thought, yeah, you know what, that makes sense. But I've heard him before where, you know, he's just frustrated like hell, and he's got to get rid of that frustration and get his focus back to where he needs to be when he's out there on track getting the job done.
Well, speaking of being frustrated, let's finish on Red Bull. We haven't spoken about them yet. It's got to be another frustrating weekend for them, isn't it? I mean, they were the team that came into this season with probably the biggest expectations, and yet it's been another tricky one. I mean, Max Verstappen finished 5th, but he was a minute behind Bottas. I mean, had another rear brake failure on Ricciardo's car. I mean, are they pinning everything on this update coming for Barcelona?
Well, you've got to say they're pinning the next stage of their development on it, because presently they're not where they want to be. I mean, we always associate Red Bull and, of course, Adrian with fantastic chassis, brilliant aerodynamics, but something's not completely working. And, you know, I would hesitate to keep pointing the finger at Renault, because the FIA have cited that they're pretty happy now with the parity of the top 3 engines, who are being within 0.3 of each other, so and 3%. You know, but Red Bull are disputing that. But, you know, whatever it is... Well, would you?
Yeah.
Well, then...
I don't think Renault... I just don't think Renault are quite there yet.
The works Renault with Nico's getting it up there.
Yeah, it's not winning, is it?
Yeah, no, but their chassis is nowhere near as good as the Renault, is it? As the Red Bull. You know, that's what I would look at.
Yeah, it's you know, Renault are not right where Ferrari is and not right where Mercedes is. They're just that little bit behind. Yeah. And if your chassis is a little bit off, difficult to drive or whatever, you know, I mean, you know, I think the Red Bull driver's done a good job. Max obviously, you know, had a very lonely race in 5th, and that was the best he could do. Yeah. I was actually quite impressed with him also going into the first couple of corners, because he looked like he used his brain. Yeah. Thinking, right, I've got to give space here. And normally he's diving down the inside, left, right, you know. Yeah. But he actually got himself some space, made sure it was clean, and he had a clean race and he picked up some points, which is the best they can do right now.
I think, like Fernando, we really want to see him racing at the front in the future, don't we? But listen, that's all we got time for this week. My thanks go to David and to Perry for joining me. The F1 Report is back in a few days' time as we look ahead to the Spanish Grand Prix, where fingers will be crossed that Red Bull can come back with a title-challenging car and make this title fight even more interesting. Thanks very much. See you soon.